Hello class, my name is Professor Stan Blankenship and I'll be your instructor for MGT 4450, which is Corporate Social Responsibility and Sustainability. I'm excited about teaching this course to you and I hope you'll get a lot out of it. CSR is very special to me and I'll share a little more about that momentarily. I do want to remind you that your textbook information you can find both in the syllabus as well as in the opening announcement. So look for that and get your book ordered as quickly as possible. There's a few other things I wanted just to tell you about from my background. I came out of the business world. I spent 37 years with Vanity Fair, Russell Athletic, and Fruit of the Loom. So I've had a lot of time in industry, mainly in operations side of industry. And then sometime around 2004, I was introduced into the corporate social responsibility department in that area, which we created. And from there, I spearheaded the efforts in that area for about a decade during my career. So CSR is something I'm very passionate about, and I'm hoping that I can share some good information with you throughout this term. So I wanted just to tell you that there's several things you need to be aware of in the Start Here section at the very top of the module section. You'll be able to locate there some important projects that are due later into the term. There is going to be a company research paper that you'll do, which is due to be submitted in week 6. And then there's a community volunteer project, which is also due toward the end of the term in week 8. So please get these things on your radar screen very early in the term so that you can start working on them now and not waiting until the last moment. On the community volunteer project, that is something I'll give you 3 separate options, so you have some opportunity there. One of the options is to join in and on a community engagement project that you're passionate about, that you can help participate in and volunteer. Another one would be possibly creating your own project, and that's an option there as well. And the third one would be if you're a little bit nervous, maybe due to whatever, exposing yourself out there with the COVID and other things, then I would suggest that third option would be one you might want to consider, and that's where you'll do some research on an organization that's meaningful to you, and then you'll interview a leader from that particular organization, and there'll be a set of questions for you to ask. And so I just want you to be aware of that. But all the instructions for that is up in the Start Here section in modules. So don't forget there's a thing called an introduction forum, so I would highly recommend that you submit your information there at the very beginning here of the term so that we can get to know one another and a little bit about our classmates. So I wanted just to chat briefly with you about the first 2 chapters, which is what we'll focus on in the first week's module. Chapter 1 is about what is corporate social responsibility, and that covers a huge area. And I just want to say that all aspects of the organization really touch on CSR, and that's something that you'll see as you go through the book, the textbook, through the PowerPoints, and throughout this particular term. You'll see how it involves itself in so many other facets of the organization. So be on the lookout for that. Chapter 1, there's a section in there from a guy named Archie Carroll, who's a professor over at the University of Georgia, and he came up with this idea about the pyramid, and he was one of the early innovators when it came to CSR back in the 1970s. He was coming up with these ideas, and really what he's talking about here is there's these 4 different areas. There's the responsibility in economics, so the economic responsibility, the legal responsibility, the ethical responsibility, and then the discretionary responsibility. And that's part of his pyramid that he sort of constructed up. So I want you to read that in your textbook. That's something really important to understand the basics of what CSR is about. In addition, your first discussion board is actually about this particular topic. So, make sure you do your homework there, and then engage in your discussion board. And remember, I always want you to find at least a couple of students to comment on their particular post. That's part of that classroom involvement, discussion, engagement that goes on. Since we are online, this is one way that we can sort of bring that together and participate as a class. So I want you to be aware of that as well. And then the other thing is, in that first chapter, it basically gives you good information on the foundations of CSR, with the ethical argument of CSR, the moral argument, the rational argument of CSR, and the economic argument. So all that plays in. And I wanted just to give you that as a high-level overview of the first chapter. And then chapter 2, which really encompasses this introduction to CSR, is all about the driving forces of corporate social responsibility. That's things like affluence, like sustainability, globalization, communication, and the brands themselves, the company's brand that they're marketing. So all that is part of corporate social responsibility. So I really want to give you a high-level overview of how it impacted me in my career and the things that we were responsible for when I was at Vanity Fair and doing this same job for Russell Athletic and Fruit of the Loom. So there's a thing called a code of conduct. And I bring this to my face-to-face classes, and I'd like just to show you. This is just basically, the Bible for organizations. It's making sure that you identify clearly what your expectations are for anyone who is manufacturing your brands around the world. It used to be real simple. When I first got into the industry, all of our factories were in South Alabama and Northwest Florida. So we had, that was our key area. We had our employees in our factories. We had our headquarters office where people would come visit us all the time. So we really didn't worry about a thing called a code of conduct. Not until we started going offshore. When we went offshore, we had to make it real clear of the rules that we expected these particular facilities to play by. And so that's basically what this is. And so, it's all about respecting people. And we have all these different elements in our code of conduct. Various things like safety and health, talking about discrimination, harassment and abuse, child labor, forced labor, working hours, compensation. You want to make sure that the factories that are producing your family of brands are complying with this code of conduct. It also talks about sustainability and talk about environmental situations as well, and so forth. And there's even some contact information at the bottom of the code of conduct where employees in these factories have a means of reaching out. It can be through email, through text, it can be through telephone hotlines, so that we would know if there's something going on in these factories. And part of my job was to making sure that all the factories adhered to this particular code, and I would go visit the factories. We would hire third-party monitors. These are auditors or auditing firms, assessment firms that would go out, do the assessment of the factory, making sure that they were complying with these standards as well as other standards in the industry to ensure that the factories were meeting the expectations of our organization. And so companies all over the world do this type of thing. That's part of corporate social responsibility, is making sure that the code of conduct is complied with. Okay? So in addition to that, there's all kind of other opportunities for organizations to show that they're involved in corporate social responsibility. There's volunteerism in the community, that type of engagement. There's involving yourself in funding things, organizations that are special to your company. So if there's certain missions that the organization's all about, and they support those missions. That's part of CSR itself. So CSR touches a lot of different areas. In organizations, a lot of times it's either found in the human resource area, sometimes it's found in the legal area, sometimes it's found under operations. It just sort of depends on the organization and where it best fits. But CSR is just a real important facet of any company, and it has grown to the point now where there's department heads all over the organizations today, in the business world today, that CSR now plays a major role. And so I worked my way into being the guy that was overseeing all of corporate social responsibility for Fruit of the Loom Incorporated. And we had about 350 factories around the world. There were just over 20 of them that were actually owned, and we had people on our payroll, but the rest of them were sourced. And so we would have to go out, constantly audit and assess all those factories, and making sure they complied with that code of conduct. And I would visit factories in multiple countries all around this globe over the course of my career, to make sure we were complying with the codes, to find out what the needs of the people were, and that type of thing. So CSR is a lot of outreach, but it's also ensuring that you can be proud of the facilities that are manufacturing your particular brands. So again, that's just a short blurb on the first two chapters, just a little high level overview of what corporate social responsibility is and what it's all about. And I appreciate your time today and look forward to seeing you in the near future. Thank you.